Good morning. Do you need to go to another shift before I start, Austin? Is there technologically, are we fine?
Yeah, we're all good. We're live.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I now call this regular meeting of the KCRHA Governing Committee to order. My name is Bruce Harrell. I'm the mayor of the city and on the governing committee. We start by grounding our work in our theory of change, which is if we create a homeless response system that centers people with lived experience, then we will be able to focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. This is a hybrid meeting, so there is a physical location and a virtual access. And so today the physical location is the Columbia City Library, 98118 Best, oh, that's not on the script, I'll say where I've lived for 40 years. Now, Austin, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Member Braddock?
Here.
Member McDermott?
Here.
Member Balducci? Member Salcedo? Member McWhorter Jr.?
Here.
Member Burney?
Here.
Member Prince? Member Backus?
Here.
Member Lewis? Chair Harrell?
Here.
Member Herbold?
There.
And Member Green?
Here.
Chair, we currently have 8 at quorum. I'll keep an eye out and make sure that if we do gain quorum to flag you down. But
Okay, so we have 8, 9 is a quorum, as I recall, and so without a quorum, we'll proceed through the agenda. I won't call for any votes unless we get a quorum, but we'll still try to, I'll sort of let the conversations flow organically. If we can still discuss items perhaps without a vote, we'll sort of get to it when we get to it. So let's proceed that way. Let me do a land acknowledgement before we proceed. We acknowledge that King County is located on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. We honor this land and its people past and present, and we are committed to directing funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. Okay, so at every meeting, of course, we reserve time for public comments, and this would be the public comment section.
Mr.
So
Mayor.
yes, Board Member Green.
Thank you. May I briefly share an acknowledgement regarding the National Homeless Persons Memorial Day, which is today? Can I briefly say a few words?
Absolutely, we welcome that.
Thank you, sir. So today is National Homeless Persons Memorial or Remembrance Day. It takes place each year on the longest night of the year, the winter solstice, usually on December 21st. Nearly 400 of our unhoused neighbors and children have died unsheltered this year. WHEEL Women in Black, a group of grassroots organizing of homeless and formerly homeless women, will be holding a solstice ritual and vigil at sunset at City Hall today on 4th and James to read names and hear words of blessing and invocation from faith community leaders and others, and then stand a mournful hour-long vigil for our unhoused neighbors that have passed away. So if you are able, please join WHEEL Women in Black this evening if you are able. But additionally, I would be remiss to not share how forced displacements, often referred to as sweeps, exacerbate this issue and contribute to numerous deaths of unhoused community members. A recent 2023 study published in the JAMA Journal of Internal Medicine reported the following about the involuntary displacement of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. That this type of displacement is more deadly than fires and natural disasters. Hospitalization rates double and costly emergency visits triple. overdoses increased by 500%. And only 1 in 5 individuals affected by an involuntary forced displacement actually permanently remain indoor as a result. Now, 98% of our unhoused folks want permanent housing, but they largely do not want shelters that would disconnect them from a sense of security, dignity, and familiarity that their encampment family may bring. Not only are involuntary displacements costly, they are not effective. I empathize with community members that would like our parks, downtown, and other public spaces to be restored and not to be used for encampments. And I believe that collectively, in true accountable, principled, and transparent partnerships with our unhoused neighbors, the business community, faith, our amazing providers, philanthropy, and everyday citizens, that we can come up with more humane innovations. This task is a large one that often ends up in finger pointing and blaming of governments. Local government cannot do this alone. Every single one of us is responsible. We must also face the fact, which several consultants and reports have been telling us for some time, we are trying to fix a $1 billion problem with $170 million. Now, I don't believe in just throwing money at things, but we must all be really honest here. The bottom line is we don't have enough revenue to solve this issue. Let's learn from the war on drugs and not make another horrible mistake by creating a war on the unhoused. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for moving forward, that was part of the land acknowledgement section. I suppose it was some kind of acknowledgement. It sounded more like a speech. And so next time, forewarn me on what section people want to give opinions on versus what we just call acknowledgements. So thank you for your words. We're going to move on to public comment. Austin, will you call the folks in order? I'm sorry, just one second. I think we're gonna have a CEO update first. Is that how this? Please raise your hand. Okay, so prepare.
I think that's right, Mr. Mayor.
We're gonna have the CEO update and then do public comment?
Yep.
Yes, okay. But I think we'll do the consent agenda first. So let's do this. On our consent agenda is the approval of the minutes from our November 23 governing committee meeting. So I'm going to call for a motion to approve the consent agenda before moving.
Chair, since we don't have quorum, we can't do consent agenda. However, we can move to CEO update, and then before that, if a member of the public comment wants to provide public comment, if they raise their hand.
Okay, so we can't even approve the consent agenda. So we'll move right to the CEO updates. Just bear with me here. Without the quorum, my notes get a little garbled. So we'll move right into the CEO updates. We'll hear from KCRHA's CEO, Helen Howell. And Helen, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. Welcome to our last meeting of 2023. Today, we'll be sharing a presentation of our 2024 budget, as well as a short summary of program outcomes for the last year. I want to thank each of you for your support over the course of the year and through this time of transition. We approved a 5-year plan together. We're improving agency operations together, and we're building a more regional approach. We're moving in the right direction. Before I get started, I have a quick update on the CEO search. I understand that the search firm is finalizing the job description, and we expect them to post it in early January. Their goal is to have a slate of candidates to present to the CEO Search Advisory Committee in March. I also want to give you an update on Medicaid billing. As you know, under Washington's Foundational Community Supports Program, housing navigation and housing stability services can be billed to Medicaid. KCRHA is working to maximize Medicaid as an additional revenue source for supportive services. The process is complicated, and after several months, KCRHA housing navigation and stability staff have been through the required orientations and trainings and finalized the required policies and tech configurations. We've received our first approvals and denials from Medicaid, and we're continuing to train staff on the required documentation. I'd also note that we're working with the State Healthcare Authority and our federal partners at the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness to explore what waivers and process improvements might be implemented within the Medicaid system to streamline the process. I'd also like to note here that the 231 individuals housed through Partnership for Zero continue to be supported. There were comments made during public comment at the last IB or GC meeting, I'm not sure which or if it was both, questioning whether that was the case. And I just wanted to note that those in permanent supportive housing have housing and service support through that program, but also the 150 clients in private market housing have rental assistance guaranteed up to 18 months, which will allow time for KCRHA staff to work with them to find stability where they are or secure other housing options that can carry on permanently. As we look forward to 2024, we have a number of major initiatives coming up. I want to thank Governor Inslee for his support of the state right-of-way encampment resolutions and his push to continue this work in 2024. I'm hopeful that the state legislature will again make significant investments in housing and homelessness prevention to build on the historic investments that they made last year. Similarly, I'm excited to see the implementation plans for the King County Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy and the Seattle Housing Levy, both of which show that local voters are prioritizing resources for housing and homelessness. More immediately, we have a point-in-time count and a housing inventory count coming up at the end of January. I believe that our Chief of Community Impact, Owen Kafitz, gave a briefing at the IB Implementation Board meeting, as well at the Governing Committee caucus meetings. Basically, the point-in-time count will take place over 2 weeks using a respondent-driven sampling methodology developed with the UW researchers, as well as some individuals with lived experience and approved by HUD. It's similar to what we used in 2022. Also, I'd note if you'd like more information, I believe that Owen's presentation to the IB has been separated out on our website as a standalone video. So please feel free to take a look. Also, much of next year is going to be spent working with our nonprofit partners in outreach, shelter, and supportive services as we prepare for the redesign, reprocurement of the system and contracts to implement the 5-year plan. Also, of course, a big part of our job moving forward is to make sure that the next CEO has what they need to be an effective leader for the agency. So with that, those are the updates that I have for you right now. I'm looking forward to our meeting in January to approve the 2024 budget. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. Thank you for that effective update. Are there any questions of Ms. Howell before we move to the next agenda item? I'll try to see if I could see hands go up. If not, I'm going to move forward. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move to public comment. I don't see anyone asking Ms. Howell any questions. We now have 15 minutes reserved for public comment. If you wish to comment and have not already indicated so, please raise your hand or sign up in person. I'd ask that you do that now. Each person will have 1 minute to comment, and we ask that the comments be related to today's agenda. We will start with the people on Zoom and then move to people in the room if there are any. The public comment is now open. And Austin, will you please call on people for public comment?
Yes. Also, Chair, I do believe that we now have quorum with Member Lewis joining. Member Lewis, are you there? I think Member Lewis is here.
Yeah, I see those.
I am here. Thank you.
Sweet, thank you. Yes, so Chair, we now do have quorum. So after public comment, we can do consent agenda and all the other votes.
Okay, I'll come back to the consent agenda after public comment, and then we'll proceed. Thank
Sweet.
you. Thank you for being here, Councilmember Lewis. Okay, go ahead, Austin.
Awesome. First up we have is Elizabeth Maupin. Elizabeth, let me allow you to talk. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 1 minute will start after your test. Elizabeth? Elizabeth? Elizabeth, we cannot hear you. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Hello.
Hello, there you are. Hi, Elizabeth.
Okay, sorry. Microphone problem.
No
I
worries.
am currently suffering from bronchitis. If I were still on the streets, I would be in danger if there were a forced displacement, because in such case, people often lose their survival gear, including medications. We really need to look at better ways than the forced displacement of people. Being housed makes a huge difference in the chances of survival when you come down with something like this. Thank you for your time. Please consider changing the forced displacement policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next up I have is Jade Weiss. Jade, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, then your 1 minute will start after your test.
Okay, hello, testing.
Hi, Jade. I hear you.
Hi, thank you so much. Okay, 1 minute. Excuse me, the stark and harsh reality is that the 334 community members who have passed away while living outside in King County this year are victims of bad public policy, which continues to widely ignore evidence-based solutions. And as Board Member Green did state earlier, creating a war on our unhoused neighbors through criminalizations such as camping bans actually exacerbate the symptoms of homelessness and add to the problem. And as a friendly reminder to the governing committee, our jails, not just in King County, but across the state, are overcrowded and understaffed. Creating or supporting more measures that make it illegal to survive outside is not only inhumane, but it simply moves the visible evidence of policy failures into the cages of jails and under-resourced mental health facilities instead of actually solving the problem. Researchers and field experts across the state, country, and world agree that evidence shows that housing first model, by housing all, that housing as a human right is the key to ending homelessness. A safe, healthy, supportive home and community is the foundation for a stable
Jade,
life. Please,
thank
I
you.
beg the RHA, use your position to help stop the sweeps
Jade,
and
your
adopt the
1 minute's
language
up.
of
Thank you.
housing as a human right instead of merely a need. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up I have is Courtney Love. Courtney, you have been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 1 minute will begin after that.
Testing.
Yep, that is it. Hi, Courtney.
Hello, thank you. Courtney Love with the Lived Experience Coalition. I think it's very important to thank Dr. Green for his contribution to the meeting so far. I would also like to point to the neighbors to the south in Tacoma who enacted a camping ban. And as such, we have seen a 76.6% increase in street deaths as a result of the increased sweeps, forced displacement, destruction of survival gear. It is an excellent and current case study to see the impacts of forced displacement on the people who are living most vulnerably in our community, who our elected officials also are tasked with the honoring and preservation of their lives. We would like to see more in that regard, or less sweeps. We'd also recognize that inclement weather response is local, but KCRHA based, and we need to see more. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Next up I have is Tamara Bauman. Tamara, you have been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 1 minute will start after that.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great, thank you. I just want to echo a lot of the comments that have already been made. I also would like to speak against the ongoing activities of sweeping and criminalizing folks experiencing homelessness. As you know, it is cruel and unusual punishment as identified in the Martin versus Boise case. People should not be punished for trying to survive outside when they have nowhere else to go. It wastes public money, does nothing to solve homelessness, only harms communities, and upholds capitalist norms that commodify what should be recognized as a human right. I ask that you please reconsider your approach to homelessness. If you really want to end it, you provide housing. That's how you end homelessness. You provide housing and you stop criminalizing folks for simply trying to survive in a climate that is harsh and contributes to the early deaths of so many of our unhoused neighbors. Please exercise compassion.
Thank you, Tamara. I did write down a Brian Perry who raised their hand and put it down immediately. Brian, if you still want to talk, please raise your hand. If not, I will move it on over to Ann Birkland over at the Columbia City Library to see if there's anybody in the Columbia City Library that might want to speak.
Hi, Austin. Thanks for checking. Nope, just me here today.
Perfect. With that, Chair, I do not think Brian Perry raised their hand again, and so I will close public comment.
Thank you. One moment. Thank you, and thank all of your comments that indeed resonate, I think, with myself and many board members. Thank you for that, those comments. Okay, we're going to go back and rewind to the consent agenda since we have a quorum. On our consent agenda is the approval of the minutes from our November 2023 Governing Committee meeting. I'd like to hear a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Oh, second, Joe.
And is there a second?
Oh, second.
All right, see that? Nice enthusiasm. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. The consent agenda is approved. All right. Tell my wife I got at least one thing accomplished today. Now we're going to go to the schedule resolution. The clerk has a resolution 2023-19 ready for us to vote on to set our next calendar year meetings. I think all of you should have had it in your preparation materials, the resolution. I will ask for questions after I get a motion in a second, just during the discussion part. So first, let's get it on the table. Is there a motion to vote on resolution 2023-19?
Mr. Chair, this is Backus. I move to approve resolution 2023-19.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so any discussion on this? It always has some level of pliability, I guess, if things don't work out, but we want to get our schedule out there. We've reviewed it. It looks pretty good. So I'll pause for a minute, make sure there's no discussion on this piece of legislation. And if I see no hands going up, because I don't see, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
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 Nice rhythm. Any no's, please say no. Okay, so we have it. The motion has passed. And we'll move to the next resolution, which is resolution Austin, are we on track? Everything good? Okay. Resolution 2023-20 is a reappointment of Christopher Ross to the Implementation Board. So we now look back to our okay. So we're asking the clerk to present us with resolution 2023. I think you have that in your packet, confirming the nomination of Christopher Ross to the Implementation Board. Christopher is a member of the board currently and is renominated by the executive, Dow Constantine. So once again, I will make the motion in a second and see if there's any discussion. Is there a motion to vote on resolution 2023-20?
Moved.
This is Backus. I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion on Christopher Ross's reappointment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would very much encourage on behalf of the executive the support for Christopher Ross in this appointment. He graciously stepped in to fill this vacant position last year, and he has since been elected as an officer on the implementation board. So he is deeply engaged, creative thinker, collaborative leader, and has significant experience in change leadership and service-based organizations. Outside of his volunteer role on the implementation board, he serves as CEO of Seattle Humane. And prior to that, he served as Chief Operating Officer at Compass Housing Alliance. So again, on behalf of the executive, I would encourage our colleagues to support his reappointment so he can continue his great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Braddock. That's very helpful. Okay, any other discussion or comment? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of resolution 2023-20 say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition say no. No opposition, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Christopher Ross, for re-upping. Look forward to working with you. Okay, we're gonna move to a briefing, a 2024 budget briefing. That actually concludes the voting piece of our agenda today. So we now start with presentations with the 2024 budget briefing. This has been prepared by the KCRHA in preparation for a vote in January. So I'll give it first give it to CEO Howell to introduce our new CFO, James. Is it Roosh? I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Okay, Helen, take it away.
Sure. Thank you. So we are really pleased to have James join us. He's here for the presentation today. He comes with a lot of prior experience, and he came to us after our prior interim CFO decided to pursue other opportunities. So we're very lucky that James was available. He has a lot of experience and strong experience in change management, a track record of successfully streamlining operations in a variety of contexts and companies. That said, we also know that the new CEO will likely want to be the one to hire a permanent CFO. So James will be joined by Tiffany Brooks, our Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, and I'll hand it over to them. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Helen. Appreciate it. Again, I'm James Rouse. Just a little bit about myself. I do come with a very strong record of going into companies, and change management is one of my expertise. Cleaning up the financials and getting a good reporting system in line is really one of my goals here, and also strategic planning and strategic thinking. So I'm really excited to be here with this incredible agency with a lot of really incredible people that work here, and Tiffany Brooks being one of those people, and she's going to help do this presentation with me now. Tiffany, you want to share your screen?
Can you confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can. So today we're going to discuss the 2024 budget. If you go to the next slide. So we're going to recap the 2023 budget just to remind everybody what it is, but our main focus of today's meeting is going to be the 2024 budget in preparation for a vote in January on to approve that budget. So the 2023 budget here, as you can see, was $228 million. It's made up of these programs here, these providers. That likely is going to be the same types of providers with slightly different amounts for 2024 with some additions and subtractions sprinkled in. So the original plan, the way the 2024 budget was built, there was a base budget, there was some continued one-time funding and some incremental changes. That all began in April with it being submitted to the implementation board and the governing committee. Then in September, the mayor's office had released budget revisions, and in October, King County's executive released the 24 budget revisions. And then in November, Seattle City adopted the final budget. And in December, the King County Council adopted the final budget. And then we had our implementation board meeting, and now we're here at the governing committee to review this final budget. And then in January, you'll have a special meeting to place a vote on it. And so Tiffany is going to take it away from here. Tiffany is intimately involved in this budget, and she has been through all the changes throughout the year, and she's going to be the best person for us to hear from on all this.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just want to apologize ahead of time that I will be viewing and working from a separate screen, so you will be viewing the side of my face. For this first slide, we are going over our original proposed budget that we submitted and presented to you guys this past spring. We did submit a budget for $249 million. We are highlighting what the changes are between our original proposed budget and our final budget in these bold text in the cells right here. And when we go to the next slide, for our final proposed budget, we are then highlighting those changes in the gray text, highlighted text, and the final budget is the bold text that are in these cells. In the coming slide, we will go over what are some of these major changes. But as of right now, for the final 2024 budget, we are seeing some slight shifts in some of these major program areas, including enhanced shelter, permanent supportive housing, our operations, as well as Partnership for Zero. A comparison between our proposed and final budget for 2024, we would like to highlight a major shift where we needed to recategorize $11.8 million in the state right-of-way funding to shift it from enhanced shelter to permanent supportive housing, as well as a couple of decreases that we had in enhanced shelter for state right-of-way funding, one-time funding that will be going away mid-year next year, as well as some one-time stand-up dollars in enhanced shelters. We also will have an increase in funding enhanced shelters from the City of Seattle as well for 2024. Our permanent supportive housing is another major area that we wanted to highlight. Again, we're with this doing the recategorization of the $11.8 million from shelter to permanent supportive housing, as well as us having a delay in the transition of COC PSH contracts coming to the KCRHA from King County from Q1 2024, instead it will be coming Q2 2024. We are also receiving additional funds for RV storage program from the City of Seattle, and we are also having an increase in $916,000 from the City of Seattle for villages. For Partnership for Zero, the decrease there is showing the wind down of the workforce, as well as the continued rental assistance, as Helen mentioned earlier in her presentation, where we will be continuing to provide supportive services and rental assistance to clients who have already been housed. Here we are presenting a comparison between our 2023 final budget and our 2024 final budget. The major changes that you will see on here again will be in the enhanced shelter, permanent supportive housing, safe parking, and then the decrease in one-time funding that we received last year, or this year rather, 2023, for some stand-up costs for particular programs, as well as a reduction in the Partnership for Zero and inflation, where we received one-time enhancement dollars for contracts from one of our funders. As we continue to grow as an agency, we are continuing to diversify our funding. This slide is to highlight our increased growth in HUD Continuum of Care dollars, as well as the department right-of-way funding and commerce dollars. We anticipate to receive an additional $2.5 million in philanthropic and other funding, as well as an anticipated additional $22.8 million from the Department of Commerce in 2024. We are breaking down our budget based on our program type, and we wanted to highlight that our most funded program type is enhanced sheltered, followed by permanent supportive housing, and then rapid rehousing. Our Schedule B for the City of Seattle is breaking down our $113 million that we anticipate to receive from the City of Seattle, broken out by the particular fund source and the program type that the funds will be attributed to. Our Schedule B for King County does the same thing for the $35.5 million that we received from King County, and breaking it out by the fund source and the program type that they will fund. Schedule B for other fund sources are for our other fund sources outside of King County and the City of Seattle, North King County Interlocal Agreement, other philanthropic funding, HUD Continuum of Care, and the Department of Commerce right-of-way funding. The KCRHA 2024 operating and overhead budget will be $13.4 million. We are anticipating level funding for our staffing costs, as well as a slight increase in our overhead costs. We want to highlight that there is a decrease in our professional services, where we have some contracts that we had in 2023 that will no longer be needed in 2024 for system rebid, as well as us redirecting our HMIS bid focus contract out of our admin costs and into our program costs, so that it's in alignment with our funders and how they categorize that funding. This is our final slide, which is our 2024 final budget for $224,433,910. And we will now open the floor for discussion and questions.
Thank you, Tiffany. I was
You're
trying
welcome.
to stay up with you, but I had materials in advance, and so that helped out. Any questions for either James or Tiffany, or for anyone for that matter, on the 2024 budget? Again, we're not voting today, we're just digesting it. Board Member Green.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tiffany, regarding the HUD contribution of 60 million, is that the same from last year? That number seems low. Is that, did we get a decrease in HUD funding? Continuum of Care?
That is a great question. We have a slight decrease in funding for HUD in 2024 due to the delayed transition of some of our PSA contracts. They were originally intended to transition over to us for Q1 2024. However, we're delaying the start to Q2 2024 to ensure that we have the resources necessary to administer those funds.
Okay, thank you. Then the other piece, with the downsizing of Partnership for Zero and all the system advocates that were providing a lot of the outreach, you know, to the unsheltered neighbors, it looks like outreach and engagement is decreasing from the 2023 to 2024. and it looks like unsheltered homelessness is increasing. So I wonder about that outreach and engagement piece, given the rise in unsheltered homelessness and then the loss of the system advocates.
I would take the first part for the decrease in outreach and engagement. That decrease in outreach and engagement is due to a decrease in state right-of-way funding, where we had one-time funding to support some of our right-of-way work. It is separate from the Partnership from Zero outreach funding that you're speaking of.
Thank you, Tiffany.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Board Member Green. Any other questions? If I can't see your hand or any gestures, just speak out. I don't want to shortchange anyone. Are we good? Okay, I'm going to move on to our annual report. Thank you, James and Tiffany, again. So now we'll move on to an annual report on the KCRHA prepared and presented by Helen Howell and Owen Faz. Helen and Owen, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Harrell. So 2023 was the second year of full year of operations. Before launching in, I do want to acknowledge and thank both King County Council Member Joe McDermott and Seattle City Council Member Lisa Herbold for their service. I believe that this is the last meeting for each, and just wanted to thank you for all your support and work in support of King County Regional Homelessness Authority. So thank you.
Ms. Howell, let me also pile on a little bit. I want to thank Councilmember Herbold and Councilmember Lewis. I believe this will also be his last time on this as well. No, that's okay. It's just an oversight. I know you didn't mean anything by that. I want to thank not only those two council members, but the full city council that many of them are leaving that aren't on this. We tried to propose a budget to support KCRHA. I've been on record supporting the efforts and the regional approach many times through many years. And I hope that our budget reflected even when we're dealing with a significant deficit in our budget. Next year is going to be over $200 million. But this council, I think, demonstrated once again the city of Seattle's commitment toward helping those who are sheltered. And I know we receive criticism, as almost every elected official does in this country. But I want to thank council members Lewis and Herbold for this work and for the full council for passing a budget that we think aligns with the needs of the people out there. So thank you. And with that, Ms. Howell, you could say whatever you like or just keep going.
Councilmember Lewis, I'm so sorry. Thank you for your service. I know that this is a very important issue to you, and that you've paid close attention and did a lot of work to support us in this work. So thank you also for your service. With that, I guess next slide, please. As you know, my focus as interim CEO has been on shoring up internal operations, trying to address gaps and strengthen the agency in advance of a new permanent CEO. This work has included program review, changes in response to recent audits, ongoing work to streamline processes around contracts and fiscal operations, improving customer service, putting much more of an emphasis on that, both internally and externally, and seeking feedback from service providers and government partners in addition to our boards. We believe that improving these internal functions will help focus or refocus the agency back onto its founding mission of unifying and coordinating homelessness response for our region. Next slide, please. On the right-of-way encampment resolutions, again, I want to thank and continue to thank the governor for his leadership, together with PDA, REACH, WSDOT, State Patrol, the Department of Commerce, and the City of Seattle. We have successfully moved 335 people off of state highways and into shelter and housing. In this work, PDA and REACH have an 89% acceptance rate for the housing and services offered. So the vast majority of people are moving inside to a place that works for them. The key in this work has been taking time, usually several weeks, for meaningful outreach, and then making sure that we offer the right resources to match what people need. We are primarily relying on master lease apartment buildings, non-congregate emergency housing, and some tiny homes. All of these come with staff and supportive services to help people stabilize. The significant investment from the state is what makes this work successful. It's a great example of effective collaboration across agencies and levels of government, and we look forward to continuing the work in 2024. I'd also like to highlight the work of the Ombuds Office, which is now fully staffed, finally. The Ombuds is one of the key ways that we continue to center lived experience. Their team of 5 talk with people with lived experience every day and bring that feedback to our work to improve the overall crisis response system. You can see the number of inquiries has increased significantly over last year, and you can see the types of responses that the team has been providing. I also would encourage you to take a look at our recent blog post that was a Q&A with Chief Ombuds KCRHA Jordan, where she talks a lot more about this work. With that, I will hand it over to Owen Kafitz, our Chief Community Impact Officer, to talk about program outcomes.
Thank you, Helen. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Owen Kafitz. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm our Chief Community Impact Officer here at the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. Today, I'm coming to talk about some of the program outcomes that we've seen so far in 2023. While this is an annual report, you'll note that we are still in 2023, so this is not going to show full outcomes for year-to-year comparisons. Instead, we're going to be looking through September of this year. These are also going to be focused on some key program areas. And so this is program level information, not system level. I won't go into too much detail about that, but mainly what I mean by program levels, we're looking at individual enrollments in different programs, rather than looking at one household moving through potentially multiple programs and enrollments in the year. Next year, we'll be able to have that system level view looking into full 2023. Like I said, we'll focus on a few select program types, the ones that we are normally talking about, and looking at outcomes for January 1 through September 30th of 2023. Included in this is going to be the number of beds or units that we have in different program areas, and we'll just note that that is coming from the 2023 housing inventory count. That includes programs that participate in HMIS and many that do not, whereas our program outcomes are specifically coming from HMIS. So those are only inclusive of the programs that are participating in HMIS. Every time we get a chance to talk in front of folks, I try to center this number. It's really important to us as an agency that we continuously center the total number of people that experience homelessness in King County in a year. In 2022, using administrative data at the state level, we were able to show that 53,532 people experienced homelessness at some point in 2022. This is the number we use in our 5-year plan, and it's the number we hold ourselves accountable to. It's important for me to show this now before going into program outcomes, to show that while our programs are doing an amazing job in many ways, we are not funded and built to scale against the overall population. That's something everybody on this call knows, and many in the public do as well. We'll start with system capacity. So this is information from, again, our housing inventory count. That's the once a year comprehensive count of all beds and units in our system. And wanted to share a little bit of trend data for folks here. We can see in our emergency shelter programs that was trending upwards until COVID, where during that time we had to do significant de-intensification and bring some shelter beds offline. In 2022, the first year that the KCRHA was administering the system, we were able to get that back up and above previous levels. And in 2023, we're remaining pretty stable compared to that. Transitional housing is the one on here that you see the trends of decreasing. We'll remind folks that the decrease in funding towards transitional housing is both a local and national trend, to focus instead on housing first policies, so that we are getting people directly into housing rather than having a transitional space for them to become quote unquote housing ready. And that coincides with a change in largely an increase in rapid rehousing over time as well. Rapid rehousing will just share here that measuring of units in rapid rehousing is a little bit different than the other ones. In our other program types, we are talking about physical units that people can be in. In rapid rehousing, it's more about resource allocation. How many people can we and households can we get into units over that period of time? Other permanent supportive housing, we see this giant jump in 2022 that continued into 2023, and that is our emergency housing vouchers, or EHVs.
Owen, I'm sorry to interrupt your flow there, but can you explain to me how you would describe the difference between transitional housing and rapid rehousing?
Absolutely.
And maybe examples. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So transitional housing generally operates as a home that has multiple units within it. And those units, people get matched into those units through some sort of system, whether it be coordinated entry or if we have related systems through veteran services, et cetera. And then it is a unit that somebody is in for a fixed period of time. Transitional housing units, length of time in those can vary from a couple months up to 2 years, but it is not a permanent residence for people. At the end of the time that they are there, the hope is that they have a plan after working with a case manager to transition into permanent housing full time, but they do have to leave that unit. In rapid rehousing, the goal is to find a unit that somebody can move into and stay at. So rather than looking at a set number of beds in certain buildings, you're looking across the market for affordable housing generally in order to identify an affordable housing place that a person can rent. That rent starts generally with a subsidy and usually full rental costs from the rapid rehousing program. Those subsidies tend to decrease over time as a housing or as a household stabilizes and can create income until they exit the program and can maintain in that unit by taking on all of the rental costs independently. So the major difference is you have one place that you're becoming more housing ready and for a shorter period of time versus a place where we are trying to have permanent housing for that person for the duration of the program and beyond. Does that answer your question, Mayor Harrell? Excellent. All right, the other permanent housing, as I was saying, it's a widely successful EHV program that has caused that increase from 2021 to 2022 and beyond. And then permanent supportive housing, we're seeing an ongoing trend upward. This is thanks to not necessarily the RHA putting any investment into permanent supportive housing, but related systems such as Office of Housing and our housing authorities continuing to build, because we know that permanent supportive housing is one of the key things that many of the people experiencing homelessness in our community need. Today, I'm going to talk about some key program outcomes for these different areas. Unique households served is a key piece that we get asked all the time. How many unique households are served in any given program area, even if it's for 1 day in the reporting period we're talking about. Here, if a household has been in multiple shelter programs, for instance, when we talk about shelter, they'll only show up once. Whereas when we move on to exits to permanent housing, we're looking at the total number of program enrollments that end with a permanent housing placement. So if a household has multiple program enrollments in different shelters, let's say, and they exit multiple times during the year to permanent housing, let's say, for instance, that somebody exited to permanent housing on January 15th, 2023, maintained that permanent housing for a number of months, and then fell into homelessness again and had to enroll in a new shelter. That person may show up multiple times in that count, whereas under the unique household served, they would only show up once. An exit rate to permanent housing is a way to kind of contextualize just that exit to permanent housing number by looking at the percent of all program exits that resulted in permanent housing. In length of stay, and we're going to look at 2 different length of stay numbers for most of these. The number of days a household has been enrolled in a program is what we're generally looking at. We'll also share in these the average length of stay for people or for enrollments that end in permanent housing. So not just everybody who's in the program, but specifically for enrollments that end in permanent housing. And then inclusive of the example that I just shared, we are also looking at the 6-month return rate to homelessness. So this is the percent of households that have previously exited into permanent housing and have subsequently ended up in homelessness again. And that is really looking at an enrollment in HMIS that indicates that somebody is literally homeless. So an enrollment into shelter again would indicate that, for instance. First up, we have emergency shelter. Councilmember Herbold.
My apologies. Have we gotten to the point where you cover the outcomes, of, for instance, the return to homelessness for each of the interventions?
No, I just wanted to give a brief definition of outcomes.
Got it. I had a question, but I'll hold it. I lost track of where we were. So my apologies.
Wonderful.
I'll hold it until you get there. Much appreciated.
Thank you, council member. Emergency shelter. So here I'm showing 2022 Q3 outcomes compared to 2022 Q3 outcomes. Sorry, mixed up some numbers there, but year over year Q3 outcomes. We see for unique households served that we had a slight increase in the number of folks who were served in our emergency shelter programs in 2023 compared to 2022. And that our exits to permanent housing went down slightly, though I would say not a super significant amount, with almost 1,600 folks exiting to permanent housing directly from shelter in 2023. This is a slightly higher exit rate to permanent housing than we saw in 2022. And what this tells me is with fewer overall folks exiting to permanent housing, but a higher exit rate, that tells me that overall we had fewer people moving through shelter. This is shown again when we're looking at average length of stay, where we see that increase in average length of stay by a little over 20 days. So this is showing that we are opening up additional shelter beds for folks potentially, but that people are staying for a longer period of time in those units. That's going to be a really key thing for us to dig into as we look into our rebid in 2024. Because what we're seeing here is that if people are staying for a longer period of time, we need to figure out how do we support our providers and what are the key items that we need to do to shift our system so that people can maintain a high rate of exit to permanent housing, but potentially move through our system at a faster pace. And then just we'll share that for average length of time for households that exit to permanent housing, that number is decreased in 2022 slightly, but is still showing that people who exit to permanent housing are staying in an enrollment on average for 208 days in a shelter before getting permanent housing. We did also see a slight increase in the 6-month return rate to homelessness at 12%. So that indicates that of the folks who exited to permanent housing, 12% of them within 6 months of exiting to permanent housing ended up experiencing homelessness again. Board Member Green.
Oh, thank you, Owen. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're noticing about the groups that are returning back to homelessness? Like, what are some of the characteristics of those groups?
Yeah, I would have to dig in a little more and answer that separately. I did not prep that information for today, unfortunately. But that is a key piece when we're looking particularly at rebid, is making sure that we do spread that out we disaggregate that. So we're looking at a number of different features there, including race and ethnicity, gender, household types. So whether it's single adults, families with children, youth and young adults, and a number of other different slices that we look at to make sure that when we're trying to make changes in the system, we're really getting to a closer diagnosis of the problem.
Okay, so you all are using an equity lens and actually disaggregating data and trying to understand what are some of the group differences to better target and tailor those interventions?
Exactly. Yes,
Okay.
and that's going to be really key, especially as we move into our rebid. Many of our webs or on our website, if you look under the data section there, many of those dashboards do have that disaggregation in it. I was rolling things up here to focus on overall program performance. So apologies that I
I think it would be helpful though in the future because, you know, our ILA has a strong commitment to equity and King County Regional Homeless Authority using an equity-based decision-making framework. So it'll be nice, you know, when you all are having these presentations that we're understanding how you're using that framework, how you're using that lens, and that we could see that disaggregated data because that really helps us to get a better understanding of where some of the issues are. You know, but thank you, Owen, for your good work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Owen, this is Bruce Harrell again. So I'm sort of just trying to still clarify, I think, a point that Board Member Green's making. So according to this, with the 25% exit rate to permanent housing, so 75% of people didn't go to permanent housing. Some of them might have self-resolved. Some of them might unfortunately be homeless, went back into homelessness. And so I guess, how do you track that? There's, at least it went up 1%, but these numbers are still obviously concerning. So, I mean, how do you know if any of them self-resolved or anyway? And maybe there's a subsequent slide. I didn't see that. Did you understand my question?
I understand your question. There's not a subsequent slide on that. And it's gets really interesting when we dig into some of that information. So in HMIS, there's different data points or different fields that we use in order to track exits. Exit destination is a key piece that gets filled out when an enrollment ends. That's where we get different categories that show whether somebody exited to permanent housing. Those exits to permanent housing can include things like maintaining rental subsidy ongoing, but renting or owning, staying with family and friends permanent, etc. There's other categories within that. There's one that includes temporary housing placements, homelessness, and also other often includes things like unknown. So we have a lot of that detailed information, and as we look towards doing items like rebid, as I was mentioning earlier, those are pieces we really dig into. One of the things I'll share, and I don't have the actual stat in front of me right now, so won't hazard a full guess at it, but we do see in our shelter programs that many enrollments end with unknown. So whether that be that the data is not collected at that time, or that a individual or household leaving a program choose not to disclose where they're going afterwards. And some of that is that when somebody is done with a shelter, sometimes they just leave. They don't actually do any kind of exit information with folks. They just leave and go on to whatever that next thing is, whether that be to another program, whether that be to family and friends, whether that be self-resolve or back into the streets. So we don't actually maintain we don't have any mechanism in order to maintain contact with folks who stop using our system. So if people do move and self-resolve and don't report it through this, we don't actually have a mechanism with which to track that piece of information. It's been one of the harder things in homelessness to track over time, is that people try to hazard a guess at what the self-resolution number might be, but we don't have a very good mechanism to capture that. At a separate time, would love to talk with you all about kind of an infrastructure that we're building that we talked about previously, our system-wide by name list, which will help us get to a better proxy for that, but that is a ways out before we will have access to that, Mayor Harrell.
Thank you.
Just one last quick question, Owen. Do we ever analyze the data by, say, different providers? Like there might be a provider that is, for example, their clients have a very low rate of return, or their average length from homeless to lease up, like, so that type of, like, we could learn from maybe some of those agencies. In the last piece, do you notice any geographical differences in, like, how could we understand how folks are doing in the different geographies too? And I guess that'll be for a future something, but thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer that last one first and then go in. That is for a future something. We're working, the community impact team, my team is working really closely with the sub-regional planning team to figure out how we can better get to at least sub-regional data on that. And it's really key that we get to a better geographic understanding. So I'm really glad you brought that up. That is for a future part. We're working on building some pieces directly into HMIS to better identify what's happening in those different sub-regions. And to your first question, yes, we can get this information not just by provider, but down to individual programs. Many programs are set up in very different ways, and it's important for us to be able to look at what is working and what's not. And that is why I think over the last, at least the last 7 years that I've been working either at the city of Seattle or here on homelessness, there's been that push towards enhanced shelter, knowing that many of the features of being able to stay 24/7, store belongings, et cetera, are actually better models to serve people. And so that was understood by advocacy from folks, and then of course digging in to show it within the data that that does have better results. So those pieces are something we definitely have. Again, on our website, there is on our system performance dashboard, it gets down to individual programs on there, so we can see that. And then when we look for rebid again, those are key pieces that we need to dig into to see, especially post-COVID, what is and is not working, so that we can better lean into and learn from providers that are being wildly successful. Transitional housing. So this was interesting to me to see, and something worth digging into as we look again into rebid, is that even though there were fewer units in 2023 overall in transitional housing, it served more folks. And with fewer units overall, it also had a very similar number of exits to permanent housing. So it's really interesting for me to be looking across this program and see, or this program area, and see that it's maintaining at a fairly high level without, or with a decrease in total units available for folks. One of the key pieces that I see that contributes to that is that the average length of stay for households that exit to permanent housing decreased by over 40 days. It's more than a month of a unit being available that wasn't before. So more people are able to come into and use the units that are available in this program area. To Board Member Green's point, that's a key piece that we want to dig into to figure out where is that coming from different providers and programs, so that we can learn from that and help scale it across the system. Rapid rehousing.
Owen, when you look at the transitional housing from the shelter, although the length of stay is longer, the returns are dramatically less, and the exits to permanent housing is dramatically less. And so is it like transitional housing is a much better investment than these shelters? I know HUD and others have kind of turned away from there was a period of time where transitional housing was bad, but here transitional housing is looking much better than emergency shelter. Is that? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Apologies. It's hard to say that it's better. It's serving a different purpose in our system is usually how I look at it. So many folks who do end up in transitional housing are touching other points of the system before. Oftentimes that does include shelter. And so while the length of stay and the exit to permanent housing is different between those two program types, if we look at it across for the whole episode of homelessness, which is that piece that I'm working with my team to have next year for us to be able to look at more deeply, we can see that those two pieces work together for these outcomes. And so it's not exactly that this is a better program, so much as it's serving a different function. When we're looking at disaggregating up kind of larger categories, we would consider transitional housing really on the housing side, so a housing kind of intervention, whereas emergency shelter is really an emergency, get somebody off the streets in a safe place to be. And to receive services. So it's a little bit different. There's also a different amount of funding that goes into each of them in order to make a program successful. Rapid rehousing. So this is the one that I was mentioning systems are moving more towards. We see for 2023 that we saw quite a few more households served than we did in 2022. And a relatively similar number of people exiting to permanent housing. So we're seeing more or less status quo across many of these year to year, except for the average length of stay for households that exit to permanent housing. We see a significant decrease in this, which is something for us, again, to really dig into to see what programs are causing that change that we can learn from. Because while there may not be a significant number more resources going into rapid rehousing in 2023, we can use those resources better if we're able to stabilize people within these units and for them to stay for the ongoing after exiting the program earlier. A key piece to dig in here is while 4 to 6% is relatively small, I do really want to know why there's that increase in return rates to homelessness. Councilmember Herbold.
Thank you. Just a general question about the return rate to homelessness for rapid rehousing. I understand that the metric here is a 6-month return rate. It was my understanding, and this might be a policy that's changed, but in the past, at least, rapid rehousing was about 6 months worth of assistance. So if you're getting the housing cost assistance for 6 months, it's not very meaningful that nobody during that period of time is returning to homelessness. So can you talk a little bit about how long people are allowed to stay in rapid rehousing and receive that rent assistance that program offers? I do believe it's been extended from 6 months.
Thank you for that question. And I can't actually state what the current policy is on that, but I'll clarify what this data point means. So in a rapid rehousing enrollment, the enrollment starts when you get matched with a program in order to identify housing. There's another data point, which is about move-in. So when does a person move into housing? After that person moves into housing, their enrollment is still active. So they are receiving case management support. They're receiving the rental supports that you mentioned, council member, through the end of their enrollment. And so when a person exits from that program is when we start to look at this return window. So it's after somebody fully stops receiving both the case management support and the rental support that we start to look forward. So this 6-month return rate is 6 months after somebody fully ends that subsidy.
Thank you.
Right. Last one I have for you is permanent supportive housing. For permanent supportive housing, we did see an increase of 201 unique households year over year. So I'm very happy to see that increase happening here. Permanent housing outcomes or PSH outcomes, excuse me, are slightly different than what we are looking at in the 3 previous interventions. Here, because permanent supportive housing is in its name meant to be permanent for most folks, we're looking at a success of not just exiting the program to permanent housing, but also those that maintain within that housing. So here it looks a little different. We're talking about maintained housing or exited to permanent housing. And we did see a slight increase in that from 2022 to 2023. Overall, we see a pretty consistent year over year success rate of that of exiting to permanent housing or maintaining housing around 93 or 92%. This maintains pretty constant, not just for these 2 years, but for many previous years as well. A key piece here, though, is while we have many units of permanent supportive housing, it's the units that we have the most of in our system. Most of those units become available very infrequently because the average length of stay is so long. Because this is an intervention, again, that is meant for people to stay in it for a long period of time, if not for the duration of their life. So we have a large stock of these, but most of them are being used. We have very few, again, that are opening at any given time. We do, however, have some folks who exit this program and do move to permanent housing. A fully functional permanent supportive housing system, when it has a functional, affordable housing system on the other side, should have throughput. It should have people who are in a PSH unit for years and then able to transition into affordable housing. Because of course we have the affordable housing crisis here, we have people who are staying for many, many years before they're ever able to move on, for those who do.
So Owen, if I'm hearing you correctly, permanent supportive housing is one of our most valuable resources because it's permanent and it serves the most vulnerable, but it has the least frequent openings. So a lot of our vulnerable folks on the street need this permanent supportive housing, and the only other option for them is?
At the moment, we don't have other options for them. This is a key.
So that's the major thing we need to figure out as a system, because a lot of the people we see actually need that permanent supportive housing. So we need something that's an interim solution, some type of interim housing that offers the permanent, what permanent supportive services are, but in an interim housing setting.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Right. I think just the last point, and this is one, again, I'm really keen to look into, is while we do have very few folks actually exiting the PSH programs, as we just talked about 4% in 2023 went back into homelessness. So I'm really keen to dig into what's going on there, particularly given what Board Member Green mentioned about this being one of the places that's most supportive and supposed to support our most vulnerable. Having that return to homelessness is something we really need to dig into. All right, and with that, Helen, happy to pass this back to you to talk about our path forward.
Just real quick, Owen, do you know, like, we know that with COVID, all the COVID, like, supplemental dollars and support that people were getting ended. Do you know, like, the rate of the increase in inflow? Like, what's the sense of, like, you know, people coming through coordinated entry or the uptick? Do you have a feeling of that?
I can't give anything precise. I'm visualizing one of the dashboards that we have on our website. During COVID, we did see a marked decrease into entrance into homelessness, but that is a false decrease. We all know that because it was about that decrease is only measuring people who interact with the homeless service system. So we de-intensified shelters, had fewer places for people to come, and people wisely were staying away if they could. And so that increase is kind of, or that inflow has kind of leveled off, if I'm remembering the graphic correctly, but is something that we can definitely look into. It's a key thing for us to be looking at, Board Member Green, particularly as we are looking as an agency, not only at HMIS data, but starting to expand the administrative data sets we're looking at. But everything that I am seeing is indicating that it has either gone back to pre-COVID levels or starting to increase some year over year.
Okay, thank you, Owen, so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Helen, back to you.
Thank you. The discussion has been very educational and highlighting in particular not only the importance of disaggregation of the data so we can see disproportionality, but also acuity levels and the impacts and the numbers increasing in terms of those with higher needs in terms of our population, that the folks who are experiencing homelessness in our region. So just as looking forward a little bit about the 5-year plan, as you know, it charts our long-term path to meeting challenges that face our system, and it's our roadmap for moving forward. And as you know, it's based on deep data analysis and a lot of community engagement, and it reflects priorities that have the potential to make a real difference. Again, I want to thank you for your support and unanimous approval of the plan earlier this year. And as you know, also, our overarching goal in the plan is to reduce unsheltered homelessness. And our thesis is that we must make changes and look for progress at these 3 levels. At the individual provider level, that they have what they need to do their work well. In terms of all service providers in the crisis response system, that they're connected and coordinated so they can be more efficient and more effective. And then across, that we're working across multiple systems like healthcare, education, housing, employment, and others to prevent homelessness as well. Next slide, please. The plan is also clear and specific in terms of actions necessary to meet our goals. And we've prioritized those actions for the next couple of years. And they're on our, Owen, hoping you're still with us. Great, thank you so much. So just to close us out, significant work is underway with our data and sub-regional planning teams to develop implementation plans specific to the 7 sub-regions. We continue to work on improving our contracting process for the nonprofit service providers, and also to make sure that smaller and BIPOC serving organizations have access to the technical assistance they need throughout the process. As we implement the plan, many of the system changes needed to move us closer to success will be articulated in the rebid process that Owen referenced frequently in his presentation. The rebid process for service contracts will be the way that will be kind of redesigning and co-designing with service providers in 2024. I anticipate that we'll be talking a lot more about this in the new year. And with that, I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen and Owen. And thanks for the great questions. You stopped at 11:25, literally to the minute. And that was exactly the time we allotted on the agenda. I'll take the credit for that. But in all seriousness, if there are any additional questions, I do want to make sure we haven't allowed for that. I do want to thank Owen and Helen. I think you're erring on the side of transparency and over communicating, which is just outstanding. Thank you for that. I know, we all know that the organization's gone through a lot of changes, and for those employees that are there and doing this kind of work, everyone benefits from it. So thank you very, very much. So not seeing any more hands going up, we're going to move to the governance structure review findings. This is going to be an update presented by Emily Nolan, our consultant. You may recall that we created a governance structure review subcommittee in July to look at from an overarching sort of perspective how we can better govern or improve our governing ability as different boards come into play. So with that, Emily, take it away.
Great, thanks for having me. So I'm going to do a share screen in a minute, but just wanted to make sure to do a kind of a high level of Mayor Harrell just reminded you all that this work started in July and we are now almost at the end of December. And so I'm going to highlight a couple pieces as we go in the conversation of acknowledging that things have changed, the work is in progress. So I don't want you all to also get stuck on a conversation that maybe happened 3 months ago. So I'll highlight some of the pieces as we go of what's in progress and what shifted. So I am going to do share screen here. All right, and I'll do the obligatory ask if everybody can see my screen and see the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Thanks, Lamont. All right, so just recap again that this work started in July. You all had a resolution around looking at the governance structure, reviewing what was working, where were places for improvement. Members of the committee were from your group, from the governing committee. You also had members from the implementation board who were participating. So just high level on the timeline, we started meeting in August. This was really just to ground the group on what we were going to be discussing. Between August and September, we met as a group. I was also able to do some one-on-one conversations with everybody in the committee just to hear feedback, ideas, what folks really thought were the important conversations to be having and how we wanted to use our time together. We did have 3 sessions where we came together, hour and a half to 2 hours to really be able to dive into some more of the conversations. And I think just to highlight this piece of in every conversation, folks were saying there's more here to discuss or there's more information that we need. So I just want to kind of put that as a plug for when we get to the end of kind of maybe having some more time set aside for this group to really be able to dig in to make some more solid recommendations. Would also highlight the timing from the resolution and where we are now, that you all really called for this when there was a leadership change at the RHA. And just also want to call out again, a lot of the comments that I heard from the committee were how things have really changed, communication flow changed around that time. There was some staffing shifts and information flow that was really starting to happen. So again, a recognition of at that time, it made sense to kind of take a step back, reevaluate how are things going. But again, with that acknowledgement that there was also some larger staffing shifts happening at the RHA. And then just for timeline, we had a wrap-up meeting in November. So again, it's been a while since that group has met, and me now being able to share kind of discussion areas and the work that they did. So this next slide just really wanted to highlight some of the conversations that they had as a group. So they did come in the first meeting. We did talk a lot about, should we really focus looking at the larger governance structure within the ILA? Were there really bigger changes needed around the makeup of the boards and the committees, how many people were on the committees, and really trying to go back to the intention of the ILA and look at, was that working, or did there really need to be a shift? And I'll say in that first meeting, I think there was not necessarily consensus on should the group really go down the path of making some bigger changes to the governance structure. And so at the time, what the group decided was, with the few meetings that they had on the books, to really talk about and focus on how to strengthen the existing governance structure. So we did spend time talking about what that actually would look like, what folks felt needed to be in place. So we talked a lot around needing role clarity, more staffing support for the committees, the implementation board, and just overall flow of information. We also talked about the need for more concrete work plans so that you all who are making decisions and trying to govern actually understood the full body of work that the RHA is engaged in, and having a work plan for the year with clear deliverables so that you all could be making decisions, and that you also knew when decision points were coming your way so that you again had the right level of information to be making decisions. There was a lot of discussion around making sure that there were agreements in place around how you all were receiving information, the level of information, what information was shared between the governing committee, the implementation board, and the Continuum of Care Advisory Board. So a lot of this, I think, too, was stepping back and saying, hey, we thought we had agreements in place, or we had agreements in place, but are we all operating under the same assumptions? We had a lot of back and forth of, well, I thought it meant this. Well, I thought it meant that. And so being able to actually have just some of those clarifying conversations and then agreeing what actually needed to be documented if it wasn't already documented. We also talked about supporting the role of those with lived experience in the decision-making bodies. There was some acknowledgement of kind of the stutter steps in the beginning of the stand-up of the RHA, and how folks with lived experience were supported or getting materials, or even having the access to show up to meetings. So that was definitely a theme of a continued finding value in having those with lived experience in the decision-making bodies. And so where were places that work could actually be better supported or done differently. And then I think that last one is a big piece of the conversation around regionalism and the need for ongoing dialogue around resources and policy alignment. We talked a lot about what does it mean to have a regional approach, making assumptions about what resources folks are bringing to the table, not just money resources, but is it land? Was it policies that could be aligned? Were there places for more flexibility within jurisdictions? And so I think we spent a lot of time there that folks really still believed in the regional approach and wanted to support the regional approach, but again, needing some clarification of who's bringing what to the table, and just having clarity and either agreement on that or agreement that there was differences in who was bringing what to the table and what that looked like as you were making decisions. So we spent a lot of time the last meeting and a half really talking about then those kind of 4 buckets that we're raising up as themes. So strength and clarity of the current governance structure, understanding the RHA's full portfolio of responsibilities and work, the input on decision-making process and corresponding board administrative support. So again, how are you all, the information flowing and making sure that you're getting the right level of information to make decisions. And then that policy and program alignment area. So we actually spent time, the group spent time Within each of these 4 areas, actually building out what would it look like to them? Within each of these 4 things, what were the actual tasks or action steps that would need to happen? We're not sharing that here today because I think there was also a recognition that work also needed to be done in collaboration with the regional authority staff. And so wanting to make sure that there was time and space for those conversations to happen. This is, again, I think, an area that I'll just point out that there's already been movement. So some of the things that folks lifted up, again, was the collaboration with the Continuum of Care Board. So I know that they're here next after me. I know that they've met with the implementation board. A piece of having a concrete work plan. I know that the RHA has already produced the work plan. I know that you all have calendar invites, so some of just the structural pieces are already in play and a lot of the work is already happening. And then moving forward, where the group really was again, needing to have more of the collaborative conversations between the boards, between the implementation board, between staff with the RHA, and then also a need though, and recognition of there was other people at the, within the regional approach that need to be at the table to have some of these conversations. So wanting to spend some time looking at, again, how is the COC board functioning and how does that play into the decision-making that you all have to do? Like, how are you all working together in a governance structure? Going back and looking at the ILA, a lot of the governance structure is laid out in the ILA. And so spending some time of, which are the pieces that are actually happening? Are there gaps that aren't happening that you all originally had lined up? And then getting, I think, that clarity piece on how you're making decisions, who's making decisions, like where does the RHA have autonomy in decisions they're making at a programmatic level versus what actually needs to come back to the governing committee or implementation board. The group was very cognizant of, again, the new CEO coming into play. And so wanting to make sure too that there was alignment in expectations and having some of those shared conversations and not setting up expectations again that maybe weren't in line with what the new CEO was thinking their roles and responsibilities are. And then that last bullet point, again, I think is the bigger one that folks really felt like there needed to be more time and space of, again, what are the real conversations around regional alignment and what does that look like and how can those conversations be supported? My understanding for next steps is that the group would like to reconvene in early 2024, knowing that there's also going to be a shift in some of the seats on the governing committee. And so wanting to make sure that they had time and space to get the new council members up to speed on the work before they started the next level of conversations. So that was process and where we landed. I would love to open kind of the space for the folks who were on the committee, if there are things they'd like to share about the discussions that you all had, the pieces of work that you are expecting to see come next, or just other thoughts that you'd like to share from the work that you all did.
Thank you. Emily, you're finished, I assume.
I'm finished, but I, again, just open it up to those who participated in the work. If there are things that I didn't highlight that they think are valuable to highlight, or impressions they had of the work that's happening, or the next steps that they'd like to see.
Okay, we have one more agenda item, but I want to make sure this is really important work we're doing. Emily, thank you so much for diving in. We're just getting started. So let me open up the floor for any comments, questions, or reactions. I don't see any. Oh, Lamont.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I could always count on you, Board Member Green.
I've been quiet for a while. No, but thank you, Emily. This is so helpful. I just want to make this quick comment that I think we need to create space for the providers to be involved. I think when we look at the COC board, the governance board, implementation board, and so maybe there's a way where, the provider coalition can elect 2 members that represent, but I think they're kind of a missing part in all of this governance. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Board Member Green, I was I knew you were talking to the consultant, Emily, but did you say the vendors? Who are you referring to? I'm sorry.
Our providers, like our
Oh, got
homelessness system providers. I think when we look at the overall landscape, they're like missing from these tables and they're the ones, they're the heart and the arm and the legs doing all the work. So I think it'll be nice to have them involved. I'm sure there's times where they have to recuse themselves from a board, but if we could have some mechanism so that our providers are at the table too. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Green. Any other comments or reactions from to Ms. Nolan on her report? Not seeing any, I'm just going to give a closing comment, and that is, Emily, I'm going to try to next year. We have, at least since I've been mayor the last couple of years, we have a lot of data and a lot of lessons we've learned on how we can improve things. And so I just think your work, your scope of work is going to be critical. I think all conversations are fair in terms of, you know, we have three very vibrant boards, the implementation board, the COC, and the governing committee all have very capable individuals on there. Perhaps there could be new voices, but I think I have a sense of urgency on trying to make sure we're optimizing what we're doing. The city of Seattle are trying to step up and be a great partner in all of this. So I'm going to sort of lean on you to make sure we're transparent, we're open with our communications, and really help everyone. So a lot of work to do. So thank you, Emily. Okay, our last presentation from the Continuum of Care group, the board, and let's see, let me read something. And its role and responsibilities related to RHA governance and operations. So Marvin and KCRHA are here to present, so take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marvin Futrell. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Continuum of Care. And my other.
Hello.
KCRHA,
yes. Hello. Thank you for having me. My name is KCRHA Floyd. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the co-chair with Marvin on the Continuum of Care board.
All right. Thank you. There is a wonderful slide deck that was shared out with the meeting materials. Does anybody have any questions about the role of the Continuum of Care? Hearing none, I'm gonna dive right in because we got short time. The ILA set us up also as an advisory committee, and that's not a function in which we've been active in over the past couple of years with the startup of the KCRHA and the settling of the implementation and governing boards to the work. It is our number one request is that we're able to actualize our advisory committee roles with the implementation board and the governing board. ILA sets out that we meet twice a year so that we can advise. Areas in which we look at that we find not having an advisory role is the budget and the creation of system, better aligning our system to a county-wide approach and making access, since our board is primarily composed of folks with lived experience or experiencing homelessness, ease of access to the services across the county and which are being developed and talked about in these spaces. I watched a wonderful presentation and given earlier about the 5-year plan. And that alignment work and ease of access may actually get us beyond the data for 10,000 of the 50,000 folks experiencing homelessness if we can create better access points so that we get the data that allows us to make good decisions. The last piece was given to us this year by HUD. And it's along the lines of decriminalizing homelessness in our community. I'm going to present HUD's picture, and then KCRHA will share what we've learned from our continuum as we move forward. HUD,
Marvin, I'm sorry
and
to
Reese-
interrupt. Marvin, may I stop you just 1 sec? I have a
Yep.
marvelous slide show, a
Fire
slide deck. Are we not going to use that during presentation? I just want to know because I was trying to follow your comments and the slide. Should we just pay attention to your words and not the slide, or how do you want to interplay with
I
that?
would hopefully that you could hear Jaja and I now. The slide presentation will work, but I was hoping that as we met more than once a year, we'd be able to update where we are in the ongoing work. But what is missing is our advisory committee role. And that's
Okay.
not in the slide deck. And it is the primary reason we wanted to meet with you. We took this opportunity
I see.
so we could establish a hopefully regular cadence of being able as an advisory committee to
Got it.
speak to real issues that are being faced by our governing and implementation boards. In this case, the governing.
That's helpful. I was listening and taking notes and going through your slideshow to see if this was in here with your address. I got the rhythm now, so I will use this I will listen intently on what you want to communicate and just use this sort of the tool. Okay, sorry to interrupt your flow, you and Josh.
No worries. My flow can be interrupted at any time. Please feel free to ask questions. This is the primary one that has come out of our work. When we were doing the notification of funding opportunity last year, HUD put in a space for how we were addressing criminalization of homelessness in our continuum of care. So we started with just getting what HUD's definition of it was. And I will share what they have. In recent years, the United States has seen a proliferation of local measures to criminalize acts of living laws that prohibit sleeping, eating, sitting, panhandling in public spaces. City, towns, county officials are turning to criminalization methods in an effort to broadcast a zero tolerance approach to street homelessness and to temporarily reduce the visibility of homelessness in their communities. Although individuals experiencing homelessness should be afforded the same dignity, compassion, and support provided to others, criminalization policies further marginalize men and women who are experiencing homelessness, fuel inflammatory attitudes, and may even unduly restrict constitutionality, protected liberties, and violate our international human rights obligations. Moreover, there is ample evidence that alternatives to criminalization policies can adequately balance the needs of all parties. So I want to say that 8 months ago, that started conversations on our board, and that culminated in our board having a convening of the membership of the continuum of care, inviting all those that don't see this work every day in, and that happened earlier this week. Jaja?
Thank you, Marvin. And I want to add about the criminalization of homelessness or decriminalization is that we had at our convening a presentation of the decriminalization of homelessness and what the overall board feels and the community of the continuum of care membership is that it's very harmful. It's harmful for people living unhoused to be swept. And this is why when they are swept, everything they use to survive on the streets is taken away from them. Some of those folks have health disparities, so they're losing their medication, they're losing their, wound care or whatever. I know of an instance where someone lost their insulin, which was something that is needed. Not only that, I also wanted to and we talked about likening it to a natural disaster. You have a hurricane come through, it demolishes the town and everything is gone. Do we want to criminalize those people because now they have to seek shelter somewhere else? And maybe there's not room, and so they have to pitch a tent and they have to work and put numerous people there. So those are the things that we want this board to think about when we think about turning living unsheltered into a crime. And that is a key point in what we were thinking. Not only that, living as a former homeless person myself, only sheltered now for the last 4 years, to take people out of a community where they have built up what we would like to say as a family unit, you know, someone they can depend on. It takes away the safety of living outside. When you live outside with no walls, safety is a very big factor. And then you find yourself doing unspeakable things that you wouldn't do before if you had shelter. And with people live outside also, you know, they have survival sex. They do numerous things just to be safe. And so when we come and dismantle people who are trying to just survive, and I wish I could say live, but that's not even what happens when you don't have walls or anything over your head to keep you safe. When you know where you can just go to the bathroom and alleviate yourself because you know you just ate breakfast and had something to drink. You know what I'm saying? And so these things are crucial. And as the advisory committee of the COC, we just want this board to stop and just take a look. Be still and understand that that could be your mother, your brother, your sister, your cousin out there on that street, you know. And the thing to do is that housing first model, you know, where people are put into housing, and in the HUD definition of that also includes those wraparound services. So put them in the home and then get them the mental health and the doctors and whatever else they may need to become a productive part of society. Because they are living without homes, we want people to understand that does not dismiss them as being productive citizens in the society. It just means they don't have walls. And back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Judge. Marvin, did you want the floor, Marvin? Did you want the floor?
I was just going to make an ask, and this is to the board, it's to the chair. We would like to have a regular cadence where we can meet, our boards can meet. And I think that has been one of the missing pieces of getting us all in, you know, aware and in line with one another, so that everyone doing their thing is done so collaboratively, and we bring what I often call them, we might be the ugly child in the room, but everything can't be pretty, because in all of our attempts, the best work we do every day by committed, firm, strong folks is facing a problem that continues to grow regardless. And we want to be part of the advocating for those alternative solutions that actually meet the need of folks experiencing homelessness in our county.
Got it. Let me tell you what I'm hearing, at least as chair and as one of the members of the governing committee, that number one, criminalizing homelessness is wrong, simply put. By the way, I do not personally see the continuum of care as the ugly child. I resent you saying that because I generally like the title of being the ugly child in the room. So I'll take that title. The continuum of care is a central part of the system that we use to address homelessness. You're also suggesting that the housing first policy that should be embedded in everything that we do. I hear that loudly and clearly. You're also suggesting that in order to feel like a part of it and be a meaningful substantive part of the RHA, that you want a cadence of meetings at a minimum 2, to feel as though you're giving input at the right level. And so Emily Nolan, you're still on the phone, on the Zoom call. So I want to factor that. I can't speak for the entire board. We'll factor those salient points into the discussion as we look at how we do business next year. I personally do not disagree with anything that you've said. In fact, I embrace it and agree with you. So we've, I was very involved in the Housing First policies here at the City of Seattle. So message resonates. Okay, so that was our, and I want to make sure Jaja and Marvin, did you want to close out with any closing? You good, Jaja and Marvin?
Oh, I'm so
I
good.
have one
Thank you so
closing.
much, Mayor. I just appreciate your guys' time and attention to learning, to wanting to work together to get an effective solution to what we are seeing as a problem. Seattle is beautiful, right? And it would be beautiful that if everyone had a home and that we could see the beauty that Seattle has to offer us.
Thank you, Jaja.
Thank you, Jaja. For me, the closing is simple. I'm doing this very remotely today. I'm in Washington, D.C. I had an opportunity to attend the DC's homeless memorial service today at Epiphany. And it was great to see national leaders, and Olivia from the National Alliance to End Homelessness, Jeff Olivet from the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, Donald Whitehead from the National Coalition on Homeless. Those folks were in attendance. It was a powerful, moving service, as it always is, as we actually recognize those in our community who have passed. For me, it has always been the grounding piece of my work that without shelter, people die. I'm sure that's not new to folks that have seen me advocate in spaces. But I wanted to highlight that the Women's Housing Equity and Alliance League, Women in Black, are holding a vigil tonight at City Hall. Starts at 4:21. It's for the 334 folks that have passed in our Seattle community over the last year. I do believe there are refreshments being served at the Chinook building following, but I was so moved today to see the leadership in the space where that honoring occurred, and that maybe against all hope that folks are listening. So our community gets to see that, and that's a beautiful way. That's a very simple way to honor such a moving thing that happens in our community. Thanks.
Thank you.
And also, Mayor, I just like to say real quick, following that vigil today is a meet and greet over at the Chinook building that the Public Health Seattle King County is holding snacks and refreshments after that.
Oh, I think I'm frozen. Okay. Okay, sorry, my computer got frozen. Thank you, Jaja. Okay, so in closing, I want to thank everyone for your participation. I think you might have read recently that we almost have 1 million people in this country that are experiencing homelessness right now. It's up to 12%. I'll meet with the U.S. Conference of Mayors in January to discuss what we're trying to do here and what the other mayors are trying to do in their respective cities. We have all of the talent right here in this county that we're trying to address this. So thank you for your time. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 I guarantee you no one's going to oppose this. And anyone opposed? Nope. Everyone have a great holiday season. Let's keep the fight on. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Make it a great day.
Have a great holiday, everyone.